Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. On this channel, we look at several financial concepts which help you get a better understanding of any company's finances and help you keep up with the latest in the world of tech and finance. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Now, with that said, let's get started. Today, I'm back, sharing my thoughts on the latest interview by Satya Nadella on his outlook for the new year and a glance back at the turmoil in 2022. This comes at a time where tech companies are intensifying layoffs to adapt to the strain in the economy. So far, Google has laid off 12,000 employees, along with Amazon and Microsoft, who have combined planned layoffs of close to 30,000. For each section here, I will first go through the topics discussed in the interview, and then present my opinion on it. This interview was conducted in India and also discusses the growth of tech and AI in India in the upcoming years. Satya answers questions around layoffs, economic tightening, and the path forward for new technologies like AI and the Metaverse. He also discusses how Microsoft tools are well poised to advance in these sectors. I will attach the link to the full interview in the description for you to enjoy. The interview starts off by Satya expressing his bullish outlook on the Indian economy. He cites that at the current growth rate of 6 to 7%, India could well end up number 3 on the list of largest world economies by 2030. It is worthwhile to note here that India recently overtook UK as the 5th largest economy in 2022.
To your point, there are a couple of things, right? One is when I look at what's happening in the economy today, at the growth rates of 6-7%, it's clear that by 2030, India will go from being number 5 to maybe number 3 as a global economy.
Satya continues to explain how India has continued to be a hotbed for startup investments even during the testing times of the pandemic and the economic strain that followed it. Satya identifies India as a growth pocket in the upcoming years, as it remains a rare exception to the challenges faced by the world economy, due to inflation and recession fears. From a technology point of view, Satya uses data from GitHub to show that India ranks second on the list of code contributions. This stat is further improved if we consider AI projects where India ranks first.
It's already a hotbed for startups. I think it's number 2 in the world in terms of startups. But the 3 data points that I sort of look at, given our vantage point, is when it comes to GitHub and where we see all of the world's software developers, India is number 2 already. And in fact, when it comes to AI projects, interestingly enough, India is number 1. And so you can't, if you're sort of this next phase is going to be an AI age, you have to be long on India because already these developers, that means, are going to impact every part of the Indian society and Indian industry.
Satya also points at data from LinkedIn, showing that most Indian users have continued to upskill during the pandemic and continue to enhance their productivity.
Skilling. On LinkedIn, one of the data points which sort of strikes me as just phenomenal is people taking pride in upskilling themselves in India is double the global rate, right? All that, right? It's not about just the school you went to. It's about the skills you're picking up every day. And that's all translating ultimately into Indian growth and Indian productivity.
In my opinion, Satya makes very valid points here about the growth potential of India. He uses key insights from data to nail his points down. Amidst the turmoil in the major economies across the world, India has managed to rebound quickly to achieve a GDP growth rate of 8.7% in 2021 to 2022, which is higher compared to pre-pandemic levels. India also has the largest population in tech, which is poised to accelerate growth further by enhancing their productivity. When asked about the future and impact of cloud computing, Satya explains why he is bullish on the growth of Azure, the cloud computing tool Microsoft provides. He cites how Azure has already helped businesses in India to scale to 10 times and even 100 times, compared to using individual data centers. Azure has also provided a more efficient way to scale at the same time reducing energy costs for businesses. Azure and other cloud providers help businesses optimize cost by only charging on a pay-per-use basis. This reduces a large amount of overhead for businesses, and at the same time reduces cost. This often proves to be vital for small businesses who need to scale up quickly, and don't have the expertise or even the need to set up their own data centers.
But what it means ultimately is through Azure, every customer in India is able to do three things. One is take any application of theirs. They're able to build something that's 10x, 100x even in some cases, more efficient than what they did when they were doing their own servers in their own data center. Second, it's more energy efficient. It's something like 80-90% more energy efficient to run the same application in a data center that we operate versus operating on your own. And in fact, the other thing is demand, right? If you have cycles of demand, you even hedge against that by moving to the cloud because you're only consuming when you have demand. So I think ultimately the working capital and all forms of capital of any industry in India are going to be improved because thanks to sort of both the world-class technology we produce, but also the local investments we are making in our own capital. So I'm very, very bullish on cloud. And then if you sort of see the next phase of the cloud is AI plus cloud, that's another place where I think every business inside of India can benefit from.
Speaking of
Satya states that the next leg up for cloud computing will be supported by enhancements in AI. These enhancements will further benefit small businesses. Although Satya makes valid points on the benefits of cloud computing and its growth, he fails to address how Azure would compete with the stiff competition in the space by Amazon and Google. Amazon Web Service, AWS, currently has the largest market share with 33% while Azure has a 22% share. Moreover, AWS has dominated the market by offering a comprehensive suite of tools to support various levels of infrastructure. The digital public good stack of a country represents the infrastructure a country sets up for all citizens for digital growth across different sectors. In the interview, Satya seems to applaud the efforts by the Indian government in developing an advanced digital public good stack. He says that the government recognizes the need for digital growth and has stepped up its infrastructure efforts. It has also strengthened its identity verification and payments processing pipeline through the development of Aadhaar, which serves as a digitally preserved identity for all citizens, as well as the adoption of UPI, Universal Payment Interface, which makes digital payments processing incredibly easy.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most tremendously unique things that's happening in India, which is that fundamental recognition that if this next stage is about digital, not only do you need private sector innovation in digital, but you also need, just like how in every other place, public goods exist, roads and other infrastructure that allow the economy to flourish. Similarly, in digital, what's the moral equivalent? And India is led with the identity system, the payment infrastructure. Now that payment infrastructure is scaling into e-commerce, into rest of the financial transactions, into healthcare. Even one of the partnerships we have is with the Ministry of Electronics and Communications here around their Indian language Bhashini program, which is fantastic. It's kind of basically saying every Indian company and every Indian citizen should have access to AI models that sort of democratize language. So that means I should be able to translate from Hindi to Telugu to Tamil to Kannada or what have you without any impedance in any application, and that as a public good. And that to me is a very enlightened set of policies by the government. And also great consumption and usage by the private sector to make the Indian economy and society that much more productive.
Let me talk to you.
Satya believes that these government efforts, along with the collaboration in the private sector, would help economic growth further. Satya also cited greater collaboration between Microsoft and growing Indian startups through its suite of tools. Microsoft anticipates growth in the adoption of Founders Hub on LinkedIn, which helps startups grow. Satya also explains how tools like GitHub and Azure will provide support to these startups in improving productivity, as well as their ability to scale quicker. In my opinion, Satya is precise in explaining the growth of the digital public goods stack in India. Today, UPI has become the most used form Indians transact online. In September of 2022, UPI processed over 6.5 billion transactions and is continuously growing. This payment network is an effort by the Indian government to challenge major card companies in an open market and also curb the proliferation of corruption. From March 2020 to August 2022, UPI usage has surged 427%. In the next segment of the interview, the focus shifts from India onto global concerns such as inflation, recession, and geopolitics. Satya answers questions about the impact of these factors on the tech industry. Further, he also addresses issues related to the slump in tech stocks in 2022 along with layoffs across companies. Satya points out that 2022 was particularly difficult for UK and the European countries. He adds that 2023 would be much harder for the US compared to the previous year to the continued concerns around inflation and recession fears. This would force companies to have a more cautious outlook in the immediate term. However, Satya maintains that these would be short-term concerns, and that he continues to be bullish for the long term due to the persistent supply cycle. The change in the demand cycle in different countries would determine the rate of slowdown or recession it experiences. Hence, as a global company, Microsoft would need to focus on its operations in order to ensure expenses are kept in check, compared to the revenue growth in the short term. At the same time, the company would need to make investments for the long term.
I mean, it's clearly many challenges right now around the world. In fact, India is probably the exception. There are parts, India, Middle East, Latin America, some of the other parts of Asia are the things that are green. And I think Europe and the United States are going to be challenged. I mean, the United States, not yet, but I think 23 will be much harder. So yes, we want to be very cautious in our outlook in the immediate term. Long term, I'm very bullish of us coming out, right? Because there are two cycles, I think, Shireen, that are happening. One is a supply cycle that's a very long cycle. That's a secular shift. We're not going back to 2010, 2011, because of the geopolitics as well as essentially the rejiggering of supply chains. I think we're going to have a supply cycle that's going to persist. The demand cycle is going to be a classic demand cycle. There will be some economies that will go through a recession. Some may be deep, some may be minor. And then inside of that, there will be pockets of growth like India. And so I think for us as a global company, we're not going to be immune from what's happening in the macro. We will have to also get our own sort of operational focus on making sure our expenses are in line with our revenue growth, manage the short term, but make sure we're investing for the long term.
Well, as you pointed out in many...
When asked about the massive decline in tech stocks in 2022, Satya said that the markets are normalizing as the source of growth for tech companies in the recent future is not very clear. The market values this highly, especially for high-growth stocks like those in the tech industry. Satya, however, makes a case for the long-term growth potential of tech stocks. He states that over the long term, tech would be a vital part of overall GDP spend, as countries continue to improve and expand spending on digital infrastructure. In the short term, however, Satya raises caution, saying that tech companies would need to focus on increasing productivity and trim down expenses. He signals here that the next 2 years would be very challenging for the tech world.
Never the one who would ever say, ignore the market, because the markets are smarter than us all. I think they are reflecting on is, look, where is the growth coming from? And how should we think about normalizing for that growth? And so I think stock performance, economic performance are not exactly the same. But the key for us as a tech industry, I always go back as a percentage of GDP. The simple question to ask is, do we think tech spend will increase or decrease? If we believe software and digital infrastructure is going to be important in construction, in energy, in manufacturing, long term, then you have to be long on tech industry. But will we have to go through our own cycles around productivity? Absolutely, like anybody else. But that's at least my perspective. I wouldn't look, the only reason why I would say ignore the short term is because in the long run, we would be fine with demand, but in the short run, what we have to focus on is our own productivity and making sure we are at the efficient
How would you quantify short term and long run?
I would say the next 2 years are probably going to be the most challenging because after all, we did have a lot of acceleration during the pandemic, and there is some amount of normalization of that demand. And on top of it, there is a real recession in large parts of the world. And so the combination of pull forward and recession means we will have to adjust. And that'll cycle through the demand cycle and, in fact, come out of it with what can be another massive growth cycle for the tech industry.
When asked about his views on the metaverse and AI in general, Satya said that these technologies have so far been seen as upcoming, and as something for the future. However, it is time now for these technologies to translate into use cases. He uses ChatGPT as an example of how OpenAI presents new use cases, and in doing so, creating the next generation of AI through a unique infrastructure built on Azure, Microsoft's cloud computing platform. It is worthwhile to note here that Microsoft plans to invest $10 billion in OpenAI. Satya cites GitHub Copilot as another example, where AI is used with a defined use case. In this case, it helps coders and developers with generated code which would help improve their productivity. Satya adds that AI can be used to transform a lot of jobs, if built with proper use cases in mind. Talking about the metaverse, Satya says that video meetings have gone through a lot of changes by the development of avatars, and have worked towards reducing the effects of distance in communication between employees working remotely. However, some of these use cases in the metaverse still need to be maintained and matured. Satya says in conclusion that the AI will be the next leg up in the tech industry. It is reaching an inflection point which is similar to that of cloud computing and mobile in 2007 to 2008.
Speaking of the massive growth cycle, you talked about the emergence of the reasoning engine, which you believe is going to provide the sort of next leg of growth, so to speak. How long before you see that as being a key inflection point? What excites you there? And, in light of everything that's happening around us, question marks still on use cases as far as the metaverse is concerned, crypto is going through their own set of problems. I mean, how do you make sense of what's happening with tech at this point in time?
Yeah, I think it's also showtime for the tech industry, quite frankly, to take some of the technologies that we've talked about and translate them, as you said, to use cases that make a real difference. So what's happening in AI is really compelling, these large language models, the excitement around ChatGPT, which was all trained on Azure. We're excited about our OpenAI partnership. It's just the beginning, I think, of this next generation of AI, where we've built very unique infrastructure. In fact, the best AI infrastructure is on Azure, which trained models like GPT. But here's an interesting thing. We introduced GitHub Copilot last year. Already 40–50% of the code for any developer who's writing code is being generated by AI. That means it's making them that much more productive. So if you take that concept, to your point about a real use case, a copilot for a software developer, which by the way was...
When asked about the slowdown in tech, Satya said that the challenges in the economic situation have, and will continue, to raise the bar for tech companies in terms of their performance and efficiency. This implies that employees would likely have to maintain and even raise their performance. Tech companies including Microsoft will have to align their operating expenses, which most likely points at hiring freeze and layoffs.
CEOs are now talking about having to respond to the new economic reality. What is that going to mean, not just for Microsoft, but for the tech sector in general? Are we likely to see more pain, especially when it comes to retrenching, downsizing, margins going to be under pressure, guidance going to be a downside risk to that as well?
I think overall, quite frankly, whether it's for us as Microsoft or the tech sector, it's going to be very, very important to look inside and say, are we as efficient as we need to be competitive? I mean, at the end of the day, just because we are a technology company doesn't mean that we are the most efficient at what we do. And so as the paradigm has changed, as the bar has risen, we have to measure ourselves with the new bar. So definitely and also the growth picture has changed. We have to have operating expenses that need to be aligned. So definitely we are going to look at all of that, and it means that we're not sort of immune, as I said, to the global changes. But the one interesting thing to your point, though, is tech industry employment is not tech employment.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the key divergence that needs to be well understood, because that, I think, is positive, by the way, for the tech industry long term. Because if you look at it, overall tech jobs is actually increased. The tech jobs now are coming in financial services, in energy companies, in retail, manufacturing, and that's healthy, because in the long run, all those employees in all those industries are going to consume more tech infrastructure, right? When we think about our cloud business, long term we're bullish because of the fact that there's more employment outside of the tech industry of technical talent. And so that's, I think, what we are banking on.
The explanation about the causes for upcoming layoffs in tech seems plausible. However, Satya tries to sugarcoat the layoffs situation by saying that in the larger picture, technology jobs are still growing as more tech jobs get created outside of the tech industry. He cites jobs getting created in sectors like finance, energy, retail, manufacturing, etc. as a positive for the tech jobs market in the long run, as other industries start to consume tech infrastructure at a larger scale. This is true to some extent, but looking at the overall picture, I see that tech jobs in non-tech industries are often contract-based part-time roles, barring core technology teams. The current state of layoffs in tech companies is way too massive and has caused a surplus of talent that is unemployed. Similar layoffs have been seen at non-tech companies, where a large number of technology roles have either stopped hiring or eliminated the roles completely. Satya's comment stating that the overall tech jobs market is resilient currently seems to be out of touch with the ground reality. Even for employees that have not been laid off, the overall compensation has dropped considerably, as it varies heavily with the stock price. That is it for this video. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. Also, do not forget to share your thoughts about this interview in the comments below. See you in the next one.